Dermot Whelan has had a long and successful career as a radio and TV broadcaster, comedian, public speaker, and voiceover artist. For 21 years, he co-hosted the hugely successful Dermot and Dave show on Ireland's leading national radio station. He is, they are, the Irish version of Hamish and Andy. So that is kudos. And he's the winner of 15 IMRO. I don't know what that is. I assume it's some Irish, very important Irish awards. National radio awards, including Best Music Presenter and Best Music Program. Now, a few years into Dermot's stand-up career, he had a panic attack on his way to a show, and around that time he discovered that meditation really helped him to manage stress and anxiety. Like many of us, and he'll fill us in on the details, his commitment to meditation did waver for a time until eventually he suffered a burnout in 2017 when he returned with a vengeance, and in fact dedicated himself more than ever to meditation and trained to be a meditation teacher. He has since published 2 books, Mindful in 2021 and just this year, Busy and Wrecked. Dermot now, I find this fascinating, combines his love of comedy and performing with his love of meditation and well-being. And if this sounds like something that might be of interest to you, then good news, he is taking his stand-up show, Busy and Wrecked, to Australia this coming November. Dermot, welcome to Crappy to Happy.
Thank you so much, Cass. I'm so excited to be here. I'm a big fan of yours.
Thank you. Now, Dermot, in the time that we have, I won't ask you to tell me your whole personal history, but you did come to stand-up and radio quite late, relatively speaking, compared to when other people might start, because you studied archaeology first.
Yeah, that was so useful.
Right?
Yeah.
Such a natural progression, I find, the archaeology pathway.
Well, you see, I was only yesterday playing the new Indiana Jones video game with my daughter. She's 14 and we like those kind of exploration games. And it was Raiders of the Lost Ark that lit up something in me, and I wanted to be Indiana Jones. And very quickly into my archaeology career, I realized it's nothing like Indiana Jones, especially in Ireland, where you're just sitting in a wet ditch for 8 hours a day.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But even though you had that diversion for a time there, were you always drawn to perform? Like, were you always the class clown? Did you sort of have that in you?
Yeah, I think so. And I think, you can usually spot a future performer if they're an altar boy or girl. And
really?
Yeah.
In Ireland?
I don't know if it's the same in Australia. But generally speaking, if I grew up in a rural area, so the only stage in town was the altar. Pretty much at Sunday Mass. Right. So if you could get up on there, they had their own wardrobe department. You got things to do, props, etc. So I guess I definitely had a desire to get up in front of people from an early age, and I guess I was a small kid. I was very shy, quite nervous. And I identified, particularly in secondary school, in high school, that humor was something that could get me out of sticky situations.
Yeah, right.
And my own meditation teacher, and I know you talk about this yourself in your books, but he referred to it as your winning formula. We at that early age we find our winning formula, the things that work for us particularly in social situations. And for me as a teenager, making people laugh, I realize, and you remember little moments. I remember somebody saying, hey, leave him alone. He's funny.
Really?
Yeah. And I remember, and right in that moment, I guess it was programmed that, humor was always going to be an important tool to me.
Yeah. Social capital.
Yeah, I think so. And I guess, we've all been through it. I'm sure if you think back to your own childhood, there's certain strengths or certain personality traits that you leaned on to, to create those connections and get over anxiety or stress or things like that.
For sure. Humour was a big one for me too. Humour comes up very highly on my VIA strengths, which we were talking about before the show.
Yeah.
Stand up. So you say that you're quite a shy and anxious kid. I can't think of anything more terrifying. I mean, people rate public speaking as more scary than dying, and even as public speaking goes, stand-up comedy strikes me as probably one of the most terrifying things to do. I'm just interested to know, well, was it terrifying for you? But also just like, what is that kind of emotional, for me, like roller coaster? Like, what is the emotional experience of doing stand-up?
Yeah, it's a funny one. And you know what? The more comedians I meet and all the comics I've met over the years, most of us shared that sort of trait where we're introverts and would have anxiety in certain social situations. But yet at the same time, we do the thing that seems to be completely at odds with our natural state. And that's get up in front of people.
Yeah.
You know, when we know it affects us, you know, people's reactions to us affect us more than your average person.
Yeah.
You know? And maybe some of your listeners can relate to that. Maybe they find themselves in their jobs or, you know, in a corporate setting, put their hands up for roles or presentation giving or whatever, when a part of them inside is going, what are you doing? Are you crazy? You know, and I put a lot of thought into it, and it's like, what is the thing that drives us to get up onto that stage and put ourselves at that kind of social risk? And, you know, you've spoken about flow state in your books, and I think there's lots of reasons, but I think one of them is that on stage when you're performing, it doesn't happen every time, but a lot of the time, flow state can happen. And in that state, as you know, the self-critical voice, either the volume gets turned way down or it shuts the hell up altogether.
Yeah.
So even though on paper from the outside it can look terrifying, and often it is, particularly if it doesn't go right, but there are those moments where it does go right and you feel that connection with the audience. You feel the connection to your own strengths, your own sense of humor, and you hit that sense of flow, and that's a magical state. And once you get it once, just like any extreme sport, I guess, you just want to get back up there and do it again.
Yeah.
You know?
Like a bit of it, like it's a dopamine hit. Is it? Like, is it dopamine? Like it's adrenaline rush
I think it's everything, yeah. In fact, I did a parachute jump one time for charity with a comedian pal of mine. And when we, you know, reached the ground, after we'd stopped screaming, both of us looked at each other and went, oh my God, that was amazing. Stand up is scarier. You know, so I think it has adrenaline and dopamine and all those things. And I think as well, that's, I guess, one of the traps, one of the cliches about comedians or performers in general, that a lot of them have addiction issues, because what do you do when you come off stage and you're that high and you hear people saying, you know, I just, you know, if I don't do something to come down off that, if I don't have a few beers or whatever it is, I can't get to sleep, or, you know, so I think that's, you know, one of the potential downfalls, obviously, is that you're dealing with very extreme highs and lows. And it's very easy to reach for unhealthy things to try and manage those.
Yeah, and that goes for, obviously, specifically in that situation, but a lot of people would relate to that. You also got into radio, and in the interest of time, I won't get you to tell the whole getting into radio story, but live radio and comedy. These are two things that are really two jobs that really, where you subject yourself to fairly intense public scrutiny. You know, and I think particularly my podcast network in Australia was owned by the biggest radio network in Australia. So while I did a podcast, I was kind of adjacent to radio, and I'm very aware of this, you know, it's all about the ratings and the audience, and people just lose their jobs, you know, overnight. They're not performing, they're out. And I'm just wondering for you, how did you cope? Or in hindsight, you know, especially in those early days, how did you cope with that kind of scrutiny and pressure?
I just sort of grinned and bared it. In fact, all the consultants who were brought in to give out to me and Dave, who I did my show with all those years, were generally Australian.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because Australia was and still is seen as the home of creative radio, and this is where a lot of the big radio and TV shows have come from, you know, and the big formats and things. So I was always used to being given out to in an Australian accent in the early years of radio. I started in news, actually, and I remember in the early days as a newsreader, I didn't really know anything about current affairs. I just, again, thought I'm going to fling myself in there. I was always a good mimic. so I could do an impression of a newsreader, and I could do quite a good newsreader voice, particularly when I watch things like Sky News, where people talk in that weird way that nobody does in normal life, and they leave big gaps between their words. And so I was able to do a reportery newsreader voice, and so I got the job.
So they gave you a news job.
They gave me a news job, yeah. And then I just sort of winged it from there. But I do remember having, I guess, looking back now, what would be panic attacks on the air, where my throat used to kind of close up and my voice would sort of turn quite worryingly Yoda-ish. So I had to step out of the booth and then went out to become a reporter. And, I guess sometimes it's funny now when I think, why didn't I think there was anything wrong? I just didn't. I just thought, well, that was weird, well, I'll just find another way to do it, I think there's a lot more awareness now in conversations anyway about anxiety and stuff. That was kind of the very early noughties, and nobody was particularly talking about mindfulness or, anxiety or anything like that.
No, they weren't, no. So you had a panic attack, which you had never experienced before, and that was kind of a turning point for you.
Yeah, I was driving down to perform at a comedy festival, which was a big break for me, and I was really excited. And I guess it was kind of indicative of that state of mind that I was in. And I guess that sometimes we all can fall into sometimes is that, I had one foot on the accelerator in terms of I'm going after this. I was rising the ranks in stand-up comedy pretty quickly and it was all going great. But then it was like my other foot was on the brake going, you're going to fail. This is terrible. They'll find you out. You're not a real comedian. You're a radio guy, and I guess that sort of little civil war that was always going in my mind just peaked at this particular time because, I was using alcohol as my way of navigating stress and trying to keep my nervous system at bay. And we all know that doesn't particularly work too well as a long-term health strategy or stress management tool. And I remember I had to stop the car, pulled it over. I felt like there was somebody literally sitting on me. And I thought I was dying. I'd never had anything that acute before and thought I couldn't breathe. I was gasping for air. And I thought, that's it. I'm going to die here on the side of the road in a very unromantic place called Mullinavat, which is, you don't have to know it to know what it's like. You don't want to end your legacy there, outside a bungalow on this, near a roundabout. And I remember the ambulance came and I got on there and they said, it's okay, you're not dying. And they gave me a very important piece of life-saving equipment, which was a brown paper bag. And I breathed into that. I don't think it was an official, health service brown paper bag because it definitely smelled of ham sandwiches. But I was wondering, was the driver of the ambulance rubbing mustard off his face?
Oh,
here, give him that. But yeah, that kind of, I guess, woke me up, to the fact that, okay, if I'm going to want to take on all these exciting challenges, I'm going to have to find ways of managing the stress that these challenges bring. So quite by accident, I met a lady who just asked me to MC her book launch just to welcome people to it. She'd just written a novel and I found out that she was teaching meditation to the Irish police force. And I was like, really? I was very cynical about the whole meditation thing. I thought it was very Californian.
Yeah.
And just for people who naturally look good in linen, particularly white linen. If you Google meditation, it's always people in white linen. Yeah. And I think, as Irish people, we can't wear that. We just look like we have too many freckles. We look like we're in our pajamas. Or we very impractical. For a wet Irish winter. Yeah, we just look like we've escaped from over a high wall, which we shouldn't, from somewhere we shouldn't have. But I quickly realized that actually, no, this stuff, I because she was using it with law enforcement, I was like, okay, I think you're going to have to drop some of the cynicism maybe, and you do need to do something. So yeah, I started and got great benefits from it.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm interested to know now. What did you notice? What did you notice in you, and I guess what did other people notice around you when you started meditating?
Well, it's a bit kind of like when you start going to the gym or working out, isn't it? A lot of the time it's not you that notices necessarily first. It's other people see it in you. And it was actually my wife, Karina. She said, have you noticed how patient you are with the kids at bedtime, because they were quite small, and small kids bedtime can be a sort of a stress peak, in the day. If you've had a long and stressful day and they're running around and won't do what you want them to do, and you're thinking, I just want to sit on the couch and zone out. And I guess I probably had been sort of rushing through that and using my dad voice quite a lot. Come on, go on, put on your pajamas. But she noticed, she said, you're really patient now. So that I was like, really? She's like, yeah, you're totally different. And when I looked, I was like, I am. Not only was I not rushing through it, I was savoring it. I didn't want them to go to sleep because we were having fun.
How interesting.
Yeah. So, and the more I thought about that in hindsight, I was like, I think a lot of our lives, particularly if we're caught up in busyness and stress, we can not only take those moments for granted, but actually miss them. They're the golden moments. If we're on our deathbed, these are the things we'll be thinking about. We won't be sort of reaching out our frail hand to the person at the side of the bed and go, I wish I'd made more Teams calls. I've wasted my life, No, we're thinking, how was I with the people I care about the most? That's kind of it, really, So it can seem, I wasn't a terrible father before this. It wasn't as if my wife was saying, well done, Dermot, you haven't hit the kids in 20 minutes. This meditation's really working for you.
Yeah.
She was just noticing that I guess I was more present and I was more patient and I was more myself, But I guess other things improved. My sleep, that was always an issue generally for me. Either I felt like I just couldn't get enough of it, or I was, and I did do breakfast radio, so that kind of comes with the territory. But that waking up in the middle of the night, that 3 a.m. Little beautiful holiday we take at nighttime, where it's just us and the ceiling. And we go, great, what'll we worry about now for the next 3 hours till the alarm goes off? So yeah, my sleep improved, my patience, my creativity, in the radio studio and stuff like that. So a lot of things improved.
Yeah, I noticed that too when I started to meditate. I just noticed I was calmer, less reactive to things that would have irritated me. I was like, it's just a bit of, it was a subtle thing, but obviously now I know more, and as you do too, about the science of why that happens. But I think also when you're saying about how these are the moments to savor, like you actually have to slow down enough to just have that realization, because we're usually just so busy, like we're just so with the doing and the on to the next thing and the next thing, and I've got this other thing to do and that thing's due, and this is all just an inconvenience to me. It's only when you actually give yourself that space, isn't it, to slow down, that you get that perspective.
Yeah. I called my book Busy and Wrecked because they were the two words that I kept hearing from people. I don't know if saying I'm wrecked is a particularly Irish way of saying you're exhausted.
Yeah, I think it is.
It is it?
Yeah. Wrecked.
Yeah.
Wrecked. I think wrecked is kind of drunk in Australia. I'll have to, audience will be able to tell me that.
Yeah, well, it works on both ways. But yeah, people, I started to notice the chronic busyness in people's conversations and how our conversations had changed. Because for me, the way it used to be, you say to someone, how are you? And you would say, I'm fine, thanks. How are you? But I started to notice as soon as you ask somebody, how are you? Oh my God, don't talk to me. I'm so busy. I'm crazy busy. I'm swamped. I'm slammed. I don't know whether I'm coming or going. I'm chasing my tail. And then there would be a kind of a pause as, they realized, okay, all of that sounds really unhinged and I have no time management skills and I've completely lost the run of myself. And then I noticed that they would throw in the classic phrase, but good busy. So it would be busyness rant, moment of realization, but good busy.
Interesting.
And I became fascinated about that. And I wonder how many of your listeners and viewers have used that phrase, maybe even today, are engaged in a busyness tirade. And I was going, why are we doing that? Because I realized I was doing it too. So I started to become kind of mildly obsessed with looking into busyness. And I began to wonder, like, is good busy real? Is it a thing that we... is it an excuse or like a sticking plaster that we just stick on when we realize actually our life is my life is operating at a pace I'm not comfortable with, but because I seem to have chosen all those things, then it must be good busy.
Interesting, yeah.
You know, or is good busy somewhere that we can aspire to reach, where yes, we chase our dreams and we go after all the things that we want to do, and we feel a bit of stress and we feel that turbulence, but it's not at the expense of the people and things that really matter for us. So that kind of set me on the trajectory of the book and the live show. I began to realize that actually the world has changed an awful lot in terms of how we celebrate busyness.
Yeah.
You know, there's an interesting study from, lots of studies, but mostly from Columbia University in the States. There's a woman called Sylvia Berlezzo has done a load of work on our perception of busyness and the reward that we seem to get from it, or to you know, the importance that we give it.
Right.
And what they found was, you know, when we engage in that little merry busyness dance in conversations, I'll tell you how busy I am, and then you come back telling me how much more busy you are, that what we're doing is actually raising our social importance. We're raising our social value. And the less time we can demonstrate that we have for our personal lives, the more we work, the more we can demonstrate that we use tech to multitask, that we, you know, if we can have something visible on or around us that demonstrates multitasking, that this also elevates our social importance. So this is like what we're doing, like two little birds in the wild flicking their busy feathers. We're saying, look how important I am. I have a heart rate of 175. I haven't put my kids to bed in 4 weeks because I haven't been home. And I was so exhausted this morning, I called the bus driver Mommy. But you know what? It's all good busy. Yay. You know, and you're like, yeah, that sounds like a fantastic nervous breakdown you're having for yourself. How do I get one? You know?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the merry dance we do. You know, they even did studies on, they did a study on Super Bowl ads and how our perception of success has changed in recent decades. So they looked like the 80s and 90s, and rich people in the Super Bowl ads were on yachts, you know, just looking out to sea while, you know, staff on the boat ran around doing the work. Or it's someone lounging, that classic image of someone lying by a pool and the waiter comes along with a tray of drinks and, oh, yes, thank you, James. You know, fast forward to more recent decades, or like this decade, and you know, the teens or whatever we call them, the Super Bowl, the ads have changed in terms of the definition of wealth and success. Now, instead of somebody engaged in leisurely activities, they're running from a boardroom on the phone, jumping into the limo, heading to the airport to get onto the private jet.
Really interesting.
So the idea of success and wealth and, you know, following your dreams is very much caught up in rushing and doing and getting after it and maximizing your potential, and anything, you know, particularly rest, is to be, you know, sneered at because it's not particularly productive.
Yeah, and that just brings up so much, like, because on the flip side, if you're not busy, how that then impacts people's sense of their own self-worth. You know, people have this sort of existential dread if they're not busy or doing something all of the time.
Yeah. But it's even interesting if you watch how we throw it out, not only as something to boost our own importance, obviously, you know, subconsciously we're doing it, but we offer it as a compliment. And it's something I noticed in recent years because 2 years ago, this week actually, I left my perfectly good, well-paid radio job to do what I'm doing now, mix stand-up comedy and meditation. And so for the first time in my working life, I was just doing one thing at a time. And I was sitting down to write my book. And that was my job for 3 months or whatever it was. Usually I would have been doing it on top of 50 other things. And so people would look at my social media, and just because social media always makes you look very productive and busy, and they'd say, oh my God, you're doing so great. You're so busy. And I would go, I'm not busy at all. I'm actually focusing on just one thing, just writing a book in the end of my garden. And they wouldn't know what to say. They would just want the ground to open up. It would kill the conversation.
Really?
Try it the next time. Somebody goes, so, how are you getting on? You busy? Just go, no, I just ate Doritos for 7 hours. That's all I did today. it's we don't know what to do with it because by you saying I'm not busy, it just throws everything off course. Because they're like, but no, busy is good. Are you sick or what's, is there some, we don't know what to do,
Yeah. So interesting.
Yeah.
Can we just go back a bit to,
Sure.
Can we go back a bit to the burnout? Because you learned the meditation, it was really helpful to you. Then fast forward how long until that all came undone and you got back into it? I'm just curious about that time.
Yeah, I think I got into meditation around 2011 and then was fairly solid at it probably up until about 2014 or 15. I got a big, the radio job got a bit more high profile. We switched radio stations, whatever. And so I got into the work, and then we did a live version of our radio show, the stage version, which we took on tour as well. And I was doing all kinds of other things and bits of TV as well at the time. And I just had let the meditation go because it's just the most human thing, isn't it, that we do? We finally find something that really works for us. And we go, see that thing I was doing? That changed my life. I'm never doing it again. It's like, I'll take it from here. Thank you very much. And sure enough, the stress started to creep back in. And it actually culminated in a day where I just felt all wrong. I was exhausted. The thought of just answering emails or having a conversation or doing anything just seemed insurmountable. And I remember I just took myself to my doctor because I thought, just go to your GP, as we say in Ireland.
Yep.
Just go there. And I remember I sat down in front of this lovely woman and she was like sort of finishing off whatever she was doing. And she turned to me and she said, so what can we do for you today? And I burst into tears. I sat there and I'm not a crier. I cry maybe at rugby matches if my team Munster, won or haven't won. But I suddenly was having one of those kind of shoulder shaking big releases.
Yeah.
And after about 90 seconds, which is quite a long time to cry in front of a stranger, I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I just think I'm completely overwhelmed. I think I'm burnt out. This thing, I had burnout. I think this is it. And I'll never forget what she said to me. She said with a lot of kindness, me too. I'm completely burnt out. And I was like, what?
We're not here to talk about you.
Yeah. I was like, really? What kind of doctor are you? And she's like, no, I've like a whole load of patients out there. I don't know how I'm going to get through the day. And I was like, I didn't know what to say to her. After a while, I just said, have you tried exercise? Do you want me to write you a prescription?
Really?
Yeah. So she was completely at the end of her tether as well. So the two of us were just these two burnt out humans sitting like we are now going, what do we do? And you know what? Like, I realized in that moment, this is where we are. This is where the busyness has brought us. Even particularly people like yourself, people whose calling, who've dedicated their lives to helping other people. That's the mission. Like this doctor I was sitting with, she was completely burnt out a lot of the time there. I'm not suggesting you are, but people who give a lot in their profession. This is, how can they help us if that's how they're feeling? That's what I was thinking, So, I charged her €85 and told her to come back in a week if things didn't improve. So at that point I said, you know what? You can keep, just losing yourself in busyness and drinking pints of the weekend and hoping it'll all be fine. Or you can lean into the one thing that has worked for you. So I decided I would just do the teacher training just to really focus myself and apply myself, and with no intention of ever becoming a teacher. But then it just sort of happened after that. I trained with a lovely guy called David G. He's California based. So ironically, I did train in California with a load of hippies and did the whole crystal thing. But obviously, what I liked is that he came at it from the scientific side and the more Eastern traditional way of looking at it. And I liked the merging of those two things because I think you can, the more people, the more types of people you can relate to, the more the chance they have of finding something helpful in it, you know?
Yeah.
And for years it had felt like I had these two sides to myself. I had this sort of quiet, introvert, spiritual, you know, deeper part of me. And then I had the, woohoo, look at me, jazz hands, shouty man on the radio. And I thought, how am I ever going to make these two? You know, it was like having two sets of friends at a dinner party, and you're like, how am I going to get these people to talk to each other? And I guess it just sort of happened. You know, it happened in one particular week, and it ties into a lot of things that you talk about in your work, in terms of, you know, finding those things that light that fire in your belly, and that we change over time, and that things that did excite us in the past or that we, you know, may not necessarily be right for us nowadays. And you encourage people to constantly check in with themselves and say, what's important to me now, and have my values change and all that. But it was a beautiful demonstration of what you talk about, in that I did a comedy gig in the 3 Arena. It's a venue in Dublin with Dave. And that should have been like the pinnacle of my, you know, of my career, of everything that I'd worked towards. This was an arena comedy gig, incredible. And I remember driving home for it, and I was like, you know, wonder what's for dinner. And then 2 days later, I gave a meditation talk to 30 slightly interested people in an insurance company about a half a mile from that arena. And I came out of it like high-fiving you know, the world. I was like, oh my God, that was incredible. You know, I think I reached one person. The thousands in the arena didn't matter.
Yeah, how interesting.
It was reaching that. And when I thought about it, why is this happening? I think for me it represents that the word fulfillment, which we hear about a lot, but kind of, you know, sometimes feel like we're never reaching it. When we can bring, you know, as many parts of ourselves to the table in one go, it feels fulfilling. You know, it ties into the strengths subject, which you talk about so well. That when we're bringing more of our strengths to something, it feels exciting. It feels easy. It doesn't mean that it's not a challenge, but it just feels more, it just lights that fire, doesn't it?
Definitely. Definitely. That's so interesting. Had you felt like you went off and you did the meditation teacher training, and that was a big part of your life while you were still doing the radio, it sounds like it was a kind of a gradual before that came that full immersion to what you're doing now, because even just to be doing an insurance gig, somebody had to hire you. So had you been talking about it, putting yourself out there as a teacher, like how did that go?
I think I'm trying to remember. It's one of those things that just, when you look back, you think, I think it just sort of happened. No, I definitely remember sitting in my agent's office and saying to them, sitting in a chair like this, going, I don't want to do my big radio show anymore. I think I want to teach meditation to people, and I want to try and make it a bit funny. And they were like, interesting. They're like, we've worked so hard to put you where you are and get you the TV gigs and get you these, because I was doing a lot of corporate work at that time, but it was all sort of song and dance, MC kind of stuff. And so they were like, in fairness to them, they were like, okay, this is a pivot. Let's see what we can do with this. And as it turned out, when we started to look into it, a lot of companies were really looking for, you know, that kind of content to help their staff navigate stress and feel engaged with their work and all that. But they were actually looking for it in a different way. And so it didn't seem too barmy then. And so I guess opportunities started to open up. And then I ended up writing Mindful out of frustration because I couldn't find a book on meditation that had a sense of humor, you know, or the one that I could relate to, that was written by someone a bit like me, you know, just kind of regular Joe, you know, dad, whatever. That a lot of it was very academic or very maybe too far down the spiritual scale for me. And so then when the book connected with people, thankfully, I thought, well, do you know what? It would be so cool to just do what I'm doing in companies and with the book and bring that to stages just for everybody and try and do this thing that I've dreamed of doing, blending those two sides of me, blend that stand-up comedy and the meditation part. And so my show looks like my story told through comedy. And actually that's quite really good therapy, because you're picking out all these points in your life that could be, traumatic with a small t maybe. And once you kind of, put it through the comedy lens, it diffuses them. It kind of takes away their power a bit, And I guess people can relate to the kinds of things I'm talking about. Then I have I guess it's like a funny TED Talk with a slideshow and just explaining what I'm talking about and a bit of the science behind what I'm talking about that I've enjoyed discovering over the last decade or so. And then the last part is I take them through some techniques. So it's this beautiful kind of energetic flow where people are roaring their heads off laughing one minute, and then you see them sitting in blissful silence the next. And it's I shed a tear the first time it happened, I have to say. When I looked at an audience, I was like, oh my God, this is what I've dreamed of. This is just probably the most powerful thing I've seen, where you can see people at the beginning of the night that are resistant.
Right.
Because I say there's two people who come to my gigs. There's the group who are up for it. My shows are comedy, meditation, transformation. So there's people who come to my show who are ready to be transformed. And then there are people who are dragged there by people who are sick of their shit. And they fall into each category, So I might see at the start of the show, someone sitting there like, oh, what's this, Because people come and they don't quite know what to expect. And you think, you're not going to get me with your woo-woo, fluffy, thought you were funny on the radio, but, I do this as a favor to my wife. And then you see them, towards the end of the show, and you see them open their eyes after trying a technique, and you go, wow, something's shifted there, And I really think that humor can be an amazing tool for opening up people's minds, putting them at ease.
Yeah.
Because I was really resistant. I still am resistant to a lot of things in the meditation wellness space. I think it takes itself really seriously a lot of the time. It's one of the things that I love about you, the stuff that you do. You bring that sense of humor to it. And like if you Google meditation, you're going to see it's always really beautiful people in, $300 Lululemon yoga pants sitting somewhere where you will never live. It's always on top of a mountain. They just, for years I thought you couldn't de-stress at heights below 3,000 feet. Apparently you can, Or else the wooden jetty, the woman at the end of the jetty, perfect, sitting with perfect makeup. And I always think that's definitely not Ireland, where I grew up, because if it was, that wooden jetty would be so rotten from constant drizzle that woman would have drowned. It would have collapsed, So, part of my mission, if I have one, is to say, okay, that's one aspect of it, and that works for some people, but meditation, or stress management, or de-stressing, or finding peace, or finding space, or feeling less busy doesn't have to look like that. It can happen when you're sitting in your car, or it can be on, for me, my 2-seater reclining couch from Harvey Norman. If you Google meditation, you're not going to see a picture of my couch. You'll see a lot of mountaintops, and beautiful people, but it really is, wherever you can find it. And it doesn't have to take all day. Because I think as well, people are like, I know I need something to help me manage stress, or to, feel like I have a few more minutes in the day, but I don't have the time.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you hear people say, I just don't have the time. And they're afraid, logically, that you're going to hand them something that's going to be another hour.
Exactly, yeah.
You need to get up at 4 a.m. And, you need to sit in a position where it feels like your knee cartilage is weeping, okay? And you need to clear your mind of all thoughts, That's the other, those kinds of things. Like, we've 80,000 thoughts a day. We're not going to do that, we don't have to do it. You can start where you're at. And if all you have in the day is the length of one conscious breath, start there.
Yeah.
I'm in the middle of an interview and I just
Yeah.
brought my cortisol levels down there for a second. So that's kind of where I'm coming from with it.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think that it's so refreshing what you're doing, because there is either that we're all spiritual and we're going to India, or we're wearing lots of white linen, sitting in an ashram for a month. Or on the other side, once there was the science behind it, this is what I noticed, once there was some science there to support it and people cottoned on that this was great for stress reduction, then it almost became corporatized, like it became commodified. And it was almost to the point of I get up at 4 a.m. and I do my what do you call those, ice plunges, and my journaling and my 5-kilometer run and my meditate. But all with that, striving, achieving, making self-care another thing to do, like another box to tick. And this is where I'm at now with this. When I'm talking to people, it's like, can we just take the striving and the achieving out of the wellness? Like, can we just let ourselves just be? Like, how about that? How about just like, you're enough, just take a breath. Like, how about that be?
Yeah. And you don't have to film yourself meditating either.
No, interestingly enough, it still works if you don't put it on Instagram.
Yeah. How present are you when you're sitting in the perfect lotus position going, is it recording?
Right.
Is this my good side? Oh God, no, my hair, the wind is blowing my hair.
But you see how both of those approaches, like both of those angles, are going to turn people off. So coming at it with the humor and with the realistic, like what it actually is and what it looks like, I think that's a really great way to get people who might have been turned off by any of those other messages about meditation.
Plus, I think, if you are a high achiever and you have a tendency to beat yourself up in your head, it's always very easy to take something like meditation and then use it as another stick to beat yourself. Oh God, I'm not doing long enough. My mind wandered all over the place there. I can't even meditate properly. Exactly. And I think you see that a lot in the corporate space as well, with words like resilience and things. It's like, whoosh, you're just not being resilient enough. Whoosh. You can imagine, I think of, again, an Indiana Jones reference, in the Temple of Doom, where there's all those kids working down the mines underground, and if it was these days, they'd bring someone like me or you in there and go, just give them an hour of mindfulness and I'm back to work.
Right. That's what it is, isn't it? Yeah.
It's interesting.
It is interesting. Dermot, I'm really conscious of the time. I could talk to you all day, literally. But where is tell people where they can find out more about your show in Australia, because this will be obviously beaming to my audience, who are predominantly Australian. They're all still down under, and they'll be very excited to hear the details.
Yeah, well, I cannot wait to get back to Australia and to be doing a show there. It really is a dream come true. It's been, I guess it's been on my mental vision board for quite some time. I have a brother who's lived in Sydney all his life. I've got relations there. And lots of friends as well, so I can't wait to just get over. It's Friday, November 28th in the Paddo RSL in Sydney.
Oh, perfect.
And yeah, please come along. If you're listening and you want to see, I guess, something like meditation delivered in a completely different way, or if you've got that friend, that you're sick of their shit, then drag them along. I'll take good care of them, and I'd love people to come along and enjoy the show. Yeah,
well done for achieving that fusion of both sides of you, because you're right. That's the only way to live, really, isn't it? The more you can bring your whole self to anything that you do and not feel like you're split apart, like that's what success is.
Yeah, and it's thank you. You're very kind to say that, but I'm still learning this whole
Yeah.
self-employed game.
Oh,
And I talk about productivity theater in my book, Busy and Wrecked, and it was something that was alien to me actually until I stopped working in a full-time job for someone else, and I found it manifested for me as walking around with my laptop bag everywhere, like. I would be out with the kids, my laptop on my shoulder, going for coffee. Better bring the laptop. And one day I was going to the movies and I was like, where's my laptop? I was like, what are you doing? I was basically demonstrating to my inner taskmaster that I'm not slacking off. I'm being productive. I could check an email at any moment. Like, what did I think was going to happen in the cinema? That the productivity police were going to kick open the door and go, everyone get your laptops out. This is a Teams call. But I think we all, I guess you must have experienced that, with the many wonderful jobs that you do, that, our internal boss can be stricter than any real boss that 100%. We've ever had.
100%. Yeah, you leave the corporate job for all the freedom and flexibility so I can work my own hours and end up working like more hours for less money, typically.
I know.
More stress. I know. Never feel like you can turn off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was even reading a stat on the way here that like 80% of people who work for themselves work weekends.
Absolutely.
And work on average more like 60 hours a week. But you're constantly making yourself available. So what's been wonderful is that I've really had to examine my own behavior and practice what I'm trying to share with people through the book and the shows and things, is to really protect and value the space in between. You don't have to stop doing the things. I don't buy into this, hey, you should only be working 4 hours a week. Really? Okay, fine. Okay, but it's not going to work for me. But at least notice and value those spaces between the things that you have to do. Because that's where recovery lives. That's where real resilience starts to grow. When we start to really appreciate and be present in those spaces, because I think a lot of the time, I call it blind seeing, because we're there, we're physically there, but we're not actually engaged with it. We're not seeing the experience or the people, and it manifested for me one day. I was just sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop, and my wife came in and she was carrying shopping bags and putting them down on the kitchen counter, and I was tapping away, and it was probably about 3 minutes into a conversation, and I realized you haven't looked up since she came in. I had a sense that she came in, and literally this is the woman I care about most in the world, who has just brought food and nourishing things into the house for me and our kids, and I hadn't even given her a look, never mind my full attention. So I remember I closed down the laptop and I looked up at her, and she looked stunning. I'm sure she probably felt bedraggled and exhausted, and I thought she just looked so. And I got up and I walked over and I just gave her a hug, and I could feel in that moment both of us, our bodies like just soften. And from that little moment, I know that the trajectory of both our days changed. The trajectory of the evening changed, of how we interacted with each other and our children and whoever else came into our environment. And that wasn't a big, massive thing. I didn't have to do a training course or go to an ashram or suddenly blow up my job or anything else. That was just one moment of blind seeing that I was open to correcting and just being present. Now, look, if you ask my wife, am I like that all the time? Am I just walking around in some kind of blissed out, romantic vision of presence? No. But I guess it was one of those moments that I think we can all relate to, in that there are gifts in these spaces. Yes, you might be having a busy day. You might have a lot of things to do. You might be working 3 jobs because you have to. I'm not saying take the afternoon off or work part-time, or because the world is expensive and, we have PlayStation Plus and Wi-Fi to pay for, according to my teenagers. But it's how we are in those little unromantic, like unglamorous spaces in our life. And if you just start there, so if you meet your best pal for a conversation, that you just put the phone into the handbag or the wallet or the pocket or whatever, and that you listen. If it's your favorite song is playing, listen to the favorite song. If you've got your dog with you, just be with the dog. You know, I write bench into my diary because I have to ring fence time. Again, it doesn't sound glamorous, but I go down to where I live into my local harbour and I just sit on the bench for 20 minutes and I look at fishing boats and I drink my coffee and I just try and make those little, as I say, unglamorous moments of space, just give them the importance they deserve. And then your world doesn't seem so busy.
That is a perfect message to finish on. Everybody can take away that message as they go on with their day. Thank you so much, Dermot, for your time. This has been amazing. I would love to have you back on another time, but thank you for taking the time today.
Thanks, Cass, and keep up the amazing work. And I'm delighted you're enjoying your lifestyle in the UK. Yes. Good for you. That's brave. That's brave. Did bravery come up in your list of strengths when you did your test?
No, I don't think bravery is very high on mine. I get kindness, compassion, humor. I don't even look. I should go back and have a look at what my strengths are. Everybody listening, I'm going to put the link to the VIA strengths in the show notes because everybody should take the VIA strengths.
Yeah, it's a great little tip that I picked up from your podcast, and I did it while I was in the airport, and it was fantastic, really insightful. It's not because it just kind of reassures you as well. You're like, oh, I am on the right path.
That is me. Yeah, that feels right.
The world can be making us feel like we're not quite on the right path, or we're not moving in the right direction. We should be doing all these other crazy things. So it's nice to get a bit of, that is me. Good. Yeah. Well done, me.
I was just watching the time because we're out of here at 2 and we've got 1 minute to go. It's been great. Thank you.
Thanks a million, Cass. See you all in Australia.
Yeah.